Hello Rebel and welcome back to my life. In a stunning turn of events, I am in Florida. Yes, on purpose, and as it turns out, in order to get to Florida, I had to spend a great deal of time on a plane. 2 planes, in fact. And upon both of those planes I read, and upon one of those planes I finished The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. This book was an interesting experience for me, although not an unpleasant one. If you don't already know who Patrick Rothfuss is, he's the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling Kingkiller Chronicles, starting with The Name of the Wind, and then the second book, The Wise Man's Fear. The third book in that series is coming out, but it's a bit of a George R.R. Martin situation, unfortunately. Which, to be clear, is fine. Artists are free to produce at their own rate. Don't take my personal dismay at the fact that I can't read the third book yet as an excuse to go attack anybody who takes their time to write their books. So the Kingkiller Chronicle focuses on a character who is just really well beloved in fantasy circles, including this very small fantasy circle. And The Slow Regard of Silent Things is a novella set in the same world as the Kingkiller Chronicle, focusing on a character who you will have already met in those 2 books. However, as Patrick Rothfuss mentions in an introduction at the beginning, you don't actually learn anything more about the main character of the Kingkiller Chronicle. It's solely focused on this side character. Now, when reading this book, I was struck by a very similar feeling that I got when I was reading John Green's Turtles All the Way Down. Because Turtles All the Way Down, when I read that, and The Slow Regard of Silent Things, now that I've read it, both very much felt like stories that were not for me. It doesn't have a lot of the things that I typically like in a story. There's no action, for one thing. As Rothfuss, again, says in the author's note, this is basically a very long vignette. There's not a lot of plot in the sense of things developing and continuing to change over time. There are events that happen and you see the way that they are strung together, but it doesn't have that real gear-turny thing that I just kind of enjoy in stories. Another clear parallel between this book and Turtles All the Way Down is that the main character, Ari, obviously has multiple mental illnesses, OCD being prominent among them. And I'm not the best educated on these various terms and what they mean, but as far as I understand it, she also seems to have depression, which results in a really, really powerful page 77. Is it 77? It's 77. Page 77 is one of the most powerful pages I've ever read in a book. Now listen, I don't want this to be a video just comparing Turtles All the Way Down to The Slow Regard of Silent Things, but I have read them both so recently, and they are both so far outside of what I normally read, and yet so similar to each other that I can't help but compare and contrast them to each other a fair bit. And one thing that's very different about these 2 books is that in Turtles All the Way Down, the protagonist is very clearly taking her mental illnesses and trying to adapt them to the world around her. She is trying to fit in with the way that everybody else thinks that the world exists and works. Slow Regard of Silent Things is the exact opposite. Ari has created her own world. She adapts that world to herself. And it's kind of amazing. Another thing that made the book harder for me to read, but not in a bad way, is that the language is very much Ari's. It has no desire to be comprehensible to me whatsoever, and that's okay. Drawing another wild comparison, I've been watching a lot of Letterkenny recently, and Letterkenny has this wonderful thing where the language and the dialect and the way people speak is so far outside of American norms that I have grown up with, and yet, watching it, you know and are 100% clear and convinced that this is a way people talk and that everything that's going on makes total sense to the characters and the people who wrote the story. And so Letterkenny, while a hilarious and wonderful show to watch, is also a lot of work. I have got to pay so much attention just to be able to tell what the hell is going on. And The Slow Regard of Silent Things is like that. Ari's language and the way she thinks and the way the world exists around her and the way she exists in it are not clear to me at all, but it's very, very clear that they make total sense to her and to the author. That may not be a thing that you like, but I like it when the author makes me work like that. So that was a very enjoyable part of the book for me. Anyway, The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. It's a very strange book, as he himself admits in the author's note, and I highly recommend it. And hey, listen, it's one of those things where even if you don't like it, look how short it is. Look, this is not a long book. Give it a try. Come on, expand your horizons a little bit. That's all I've got for you today, Rebel. Hey, on the off chance that this is your first time seeing one of my videos, I want to let you know you can pick up a free ebook copy of my #1 Amazon bestseller, Nightblade, by signing up for my email list. Link in the description below. You can also find a link to my Patreon in the description if you're one of those awesome people. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Friday. Bye!